Inviting me, Gareth, and it's very exciting to be kicking off Design Days Almaty. The spectrum of design and craft and making and thinking and doing is massive, and so many different opinions and different views. Where do we all fit in? Okay, so I've broken the whole presentation down into 3 subject matters: process, people and place. Because these are the 3 things within my practice that I think are the most important. And I think it's taken me 10, 20 years to realise this. This is me, this is my telephone. When I went to university, it was a time of no internet, a different world, the old world in a way. The lack of digital resources, digital technologies. In current design thinking, there's a lot of talk around digital processing, and we're in a place now here in Almaty where you don't have access to those resources, and I think this is why you'll find my story interesting, hopefully. Okay, so I'm a trained woodworker, and this is sort of what you consider your toolbox. But to me, the toolbox is much bigger than this. 20 years ago, I made this chair at university on this very old machine as I was beginning to develop the aesthetic that became my design. The machine and the object have a relationship, and in design, for me, that is critical. These are the objects where I'm trying to find my voice. I'm free and I'm experimenting and I'm making stuff, but with no real fixed agenda. I'm almost lost in the design world. This is the last object I made at university, and the whole thing was just made with this one single tool. This object to me is very special because it sort of launched the beginning of my career, but it was the most simple, traditional object to make it that you could, it's historically, it's ancient. So this relationship between tools and computers have been very important to me in the construction of my career. And I think I first got a computer maybe in 1999, let's say, and I decided I needed to learn how to design on a computer, and I'm still really trying. Okay, so these are my first 3 designs as I learned the computer. This one is just all about I learned how to draw a curved line. I learned to repeat shapes on the computer. I don't say this is not necessarily good design, just because it has shiny materials and I've used interesting processes doesn't make good design. Objects and ideas require more. They need a context and a story. This piece was the first piece where really things started to happen in my career. The table was flagged up in England and UK, and images of it went viral. It's called Anne, after Queen Anne, and this leg is a detail from history that was famous during Queen Anne's period. The design was meant to contrast 2 eras: traditional, cabinet making, woodwork, and high-end technology and skill. That's how everybody perceived this object. But I made it by hand, not on a computer-controlled machine. Just me winding the saw blade up and down. It took 5 days to cut 4 legs. So simultaneously, we have an object again celebrated for digital manufacture, but just made with a Makita skill saw. It's one big block of timber and me. So This was the following piece in the series, which is on the poster, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London bought because it was to celebrate digital manufacture and hand craftsmanship, and it was based on a traditional Georgian period in history chest of drawers. So the outside was made on this machine, and then the bottom is then carved by hand. All of these pieces are really talking about there's some element of digital manufacture in them. And this is the final piece, and probably the most recent digital piece that I've done. I made last year, and it was a collaboration with an architect called Zaha Hadid. So the idea of this object was really to talk about hand. I realized through the manufacture of digital objects that they lacked something. There was a disconnect between mind, hand, and heart. And when you look at a handmade, hand-thrown pot, you can see the marks of the maker. I wanted to try and replicate techniques of the hand within objects, so they had a human connection. Okay, place. Where's important? Where does this happen? Where are ideas generated? When I first learned woodwork, I just learned that the material came from a shop. But of course, wood comes from trees. And long ago in England, the chairs were made en masse by hand in woodland. So 6 designers went to a woodland and learned green woodworking. No power, no electricity, no machines. We had 5 days to make something with no idea of what we were making, and then the objects were going to Milan, to the furniture fair. 5 days later, I'd made this after working 12, 14-hour days into the night. People loved this. People really loved seeing the traditional process. 4 of these chairs went into mass production. It proved a wonderful way to be inventive, giving restrictions around yourself. So we did it again, and we did it in a shop window on Tottenham Court Road, one of the busiest streets in London. We had scraps, old pieces of wood, leftovers from factory, that we just played with. And the winning, or the best design, the people voted for what they liked the most, so the company got to understand what the people's favourite product was. The product launches next week. Yeah. We like this process of working, but it's a limitation. It's about trying to get into places to understand how we can look at things in a new way. So there's a famous chair company called Lloyd Loom, and we had 2 days in their factory to use just all their offcuts and their spare parts. They upholster their chairs with twisted paper. This is the machine that twists the paper. That was my pile of bits, my sketchbook, and that's what I had at the end of 2 days. That's what we all had at the end of 2 days. This company had fallen off the radar in England and was struggling, and we launched a whole new collection just with 2 days worth of time. But not all the things that I do are about selling. Some are about thinking, and some are about rediscovery, place. And this one was about the traditional making in London, which is pretty finished. Old furniture shops are now coffee shops or clubs or bars. This is where I live, virtually on this street, and I wanted to celebrate the past. So these are traditional veneers inside. All wood, tiny, tiny little pieces of wood. I took over derelict spaces in the city, in the centre of London. I cleared the rubbish and I turfed the area, put grass, and invited everybody to have picnics to celebrate the history of the area. Another one about kind of informing people in pursuit of carbon negative. I did a project about looking at the life cycle of furniture, extracting the raw material. This is transported to material processing. Then the stuff is made, all the assembly somewhere else. And then, of course, the product is used. And if people don't love it, they throw it away. So it may last 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years. Environmentally, it's better that we make objects that last lifetimes in order that less carbon is emitted into the atmosphere through their production. So I set myself a challenge to make a range of furniture for a company without using any carbon. I didn't just do this through the making of the object, I did this through my diet as well. So I cycled 250 miles to a woodland factory. We extracted the wood with a horse. We ripped it up in the woodland. We made the parts in the woodland. We made the final objects in the woodland. And then I cycled 50 kilos of furniture, 250 miles back to London. It was such hard work. But this was to highlight climate change. We can use design as a tool to highlight issues. And it wasn't necessarily about the products themselves, it was about the journey and the story. And we processed all the data. I work at Brighton University, and at the university we worked out the carbon footprint of the object. So it's about managing timber well. Okay, so people. There's an island off the north coast of Scotland. On Orkney there are no trees. And they're very famous for making this kind of chair, called the Orkney chair. They used to use driftwood, found materials, and the other thing that they do grow is straw. This design is celebrated because it demonstrates a modern version of a situation that we find ourselves in now, where materials are very precious, and you have to use everything you've got around you. So I went to Orkney to redesign and relaunch an Orkney chair because they're uncomfortable. So this is Orkney. This is Kevin and Sydney. This is his uncle. This is Kevin. He's the last person in Orkney that still makes these chairs. People leave Orkney to go to Scotland or go to the UK for work. So traditional industry is dying. He's Orkney's only hope. So I redesigned him a chair. It's based on a traditional southern English chair and an Orkney chair. So you get the straw and you pop it through the hoop and you slowly work your way around, tying it to the chair. It's really tough on your fingers. I think it took 4 days, 2 of us, to do one chair. But it's really beautiful. The straw is gold. Oh, you have to set light to it at the end, which is a bit scary. There's the finished product. Thank you. One of the nice things about this chair is it had a drawer underneath the thing. Excuse me. This was for your whiskey, to keep you warm. Okay, so that's a little tale about me. I'm from Brighton University as well, and I teach and have been running, I don't anymore, but running a course called Design and Craft. And I wanted to take this opportunity to show you how other people have been using similar methods within their work. So both staff and students. This is made of old bubble gum, so making products from waste. This is Josh Patelli's work. He followed the guys laying the roads to make objects. So this is tar. You understand tar, right? Okay. This is more of his work. He went into a baker's. This is a baker. And he used the ovens in the bakers to fire ceramics. And he used the loaf of bread as the cast. The resource for these flip-flops came from the beach and were made on the beach by the children and the adults that were engaged in the activity of collecting the litter on the beach. This is a project about exploring cork. In Spain, cork trees are dying because industry has moved to the plastic cork. So Tanya, my colleague, made shoes from old cork, the rubber cork. We also engage in digital technologies at the uni and looking after the aging community. This project was really wonderful because it engaged in dementia or Alzheimer's. The last thing you forget when you start suffering from memory loss is certain shapes and forms, but mainly music triggers memories. So these objects are her favourite objects that she owned, and they trigger sound bites and memories of her children and her favourite music. Okay, so this was a blanket for kids in long-term care, designed by Josh Barnes. So when a child was in hospital, you gave them the blanket, but you could upload data in relation to each of the animals. So when the child was in bed, they could hover an iPad over the blanket and the images would trigger data that your parents could upload from home or family that were abroad. That's the end.
Здравствуйте, мы проект Experimentarium. Наши дизайнеры, они способны придумать вещи, они делают крутое очень качество, они делают 2 предмета, которые продаются в течение 2 дней, и столько больше нет. То есть как им настраивать вот эти производства малых серий в условиях рынка, где нет большого производства?
I guess it all depends on the particular object or product, but I think the starting point is actually the destination. And you've got to think about where you want that object to get to and what your dream and aspiration for said product is. It's hard. It's hard, but once you figure out all the steps to get to those people, where do those people that you want to sell to, the idea of this object that you've designed or thought of, but I may come up with an idea, and before I've made it, I will try and find the right people to talk to about that idea to see if they would sponsor it. I'm always trying to think and design ideas to get people on board that don't cost me any money. You know, my thoughts would be about you as a collaborative, because what a great group of people we have in the room here at the same time is about growing awareness just at home to start, and groups of you working together to go to trade shows with like-minded products, to save money and to tread.
Я скажу, что у нас ситуация такая, что у нас, так скажем, заказчик явно не хочет оплачивать всю подготовительную работу. То есть он платит за один стук. Меня очень интересует, прежде всего, вопрос финансирования. Кто оплачивает всю вот эту подготовительную работу?
It's been as hard, I think, for me for 15 years. I've made objects and funded them from my savings or from objects I've sold, and I have a workshop full of objects I've never sold. And every time after that object has not sold, I wasn't able to make anything new for a year because I had to pay the rent and feed myself. It's always a roller coaster of money in and out. For me, it's always been about riding that roller coaster. The way I think I managed to hold on was never get a taste for money. Once you start earning money, it's very hard to stop earning money because the more you like buying things. So I never let myself start enjoying it until it started to work. You get a job and it all starts getting easier because you've got regular money. So I think, in Almaty you've got a longer journey, longer roller coaster.
Есть такое выражение, что не место делает человека, а человек создает вокруг себя какое-то пространство, какую-то новую жизнь. И я хотела бы спросить у Гарета, так ли это? Не важно ли, где ты живешь, в какой стране, либо важно жить, к примеру, где-то в Лондоне, либо в Париже или в Милане, чтобы достичь чего-то, чтобы тебя узнали, или все-таки, можно жить у нас и быть известным на весь мир. Почему бы и нет?
Why not? Yeah. I think you can create your own scene. You can create your own market. There's millions of people in Almaty. I think living in a European capital city has a longer history of design is of course helpful. But you can do it yourself. And from my brief visit today, there is manufacturing here and there are materials here. It's just about believing, I guess.
Мы как раз подошли к этому вопросу, как выйти на массовый маркет. Мы говорили о том, что изначально сейчас находимся в очень сложной ситуации. В Казахстане нет производств. Рынок на самом деле маленький, даже при 2-миллионном городе. И здесь присутствуют дизайнеры, которые производят уже своими руками достаточно хорошие вещи, стабильные, и какие-то могут даже поставить в серию. Но из-за локального рынка очень сложно продаваться. Поэтому сейчас и для профессионала, промышленного дизайнера очень важно выйти на большой рынок. Как выйти на этих крупных производителей международных? Если попытаться бросить сейчас выставки, вот есть ли какие-то другие пути?
This is the hardest task. Even in UK, thousands of graduates and a very small number of manufacturers. The odds are so small, but the way that it can work is you show a prototype or an idea at a trade fair. Press is then essential to gain press. If people are interested in that idea, then press, and then they will buy into those products. I know you're talking about manufacturer, but to get to a manufacturer, it's extraordinarily hard. I think also the other important aspect here is kind of in design is about some sort of originality. If you design something that has some sort of intellectual property, or you've discovered a relationship that really captures the market in relation to the user and a problem, then a manufacturer is going to want to come to you because you have unraveled something new. Thank you.